Warning, slight spoilers for Ace Attorney 1. Near the end of the first Ace Attorney game, we learn of this event called the Class Trial, where a young Phoenix Wright is accused by his entire class of stealing a classmate's lunch money. They try to force him to apologise to the boy, but at the last moment, 2 students step in to his defence. Thankfully, it all ended up working out for Phoenix in the end. But did you know that there's actually more here than meets the eye? Because this whole class trial event actually happened to the game's creator when he was in 2nd grade. Now, it didn't end up working out exactly the same, perhaps a little more tragically, you could say. So today, I'd like to run through what happened in the fictional class trial and what happened in the real one too. Let's go. Hi there, welcome to Thomas Game Docs. So, as I mentioned, today we're looking at 2 different class trials, both the fictional one and the real-life one too. There's some interesting differences between how each of the stories play out. The fictional one, I would say, is a lot more hopeful, while the real-life one has a slightly more bleak ending. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we get talking about any trials, I think it would be in order to quickly look at the man who created these games and experienced this traumatic childhood event firsthand. Let me introduce you to Shu Takumi. This is the man behind the Ace Attorney games, and I don't say that lightly. The first game had a very small development team, 7 people, and so each of them were incredibly influential in the creation and formation of the game. But Shu Takumi, the director, pushed and pushed for Phoenix to be created. The game was almost cancelled multiple times, one of the only 7 developers left Capcom mid-development. It was truly a struggle. But Shu Takumi persevered, unwilling to give up on his vision. And finally, 10 months after development began, the world was gifted with Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Now, I think the story that best sums up who Takumi is as a person is the tale of how he got his job at Capcom in the first place. Come with me for a sec. It was 1994 when Shu Takumi showed up to his job interview at the Capcom offices in Japan. He wasn't really sure what he was doing there. He wanted to be an author, not a game developer. But his friend said that making games was fun, so Takumi figured he'd give it a shot. Now, as the interview began nearing its end, Takumi worried that he hadn't done enough, he hadn't proven himself. And so, he decided to pull out a wild card. Literally. He was an avid magician, you see, and he had brought his magic props to the interview. And so, he decided to perform a magic trick, right then and there. Luckily for him, the interviewer loved it, but they wanted to know how it was done. Now, Takumi knew that a magician must never reveal their secrets, but he did want the job at Capcom, and so he decided to give them a sneak peek behind the scenes, and thus he got the job. Alright, so that's just one of a multitude of amazingly hilarious Shu Takumi stories. There are genuinely reams of bizarre anecdotes about this man's life, and I love him for it. But now you've got a sense for who he is, let's talk class trials, shall we? First off, let's quickly go over what happened during the in-game class trial. I know that my mind was a bit fuzzy on it before I started researching this video. So this whole class trial story features 3 main characters: Phoenix Wright, the game's protagonist, Miles Edgeworth, a prosecutor, and Larry Butts, your childhood friend. As the phrase goes, when something smells, it's usually the butts. So you actually encounter Larry right at the beginning of the game. He's the defendant of the tutorial case. When you first meet him, he announces, "Dude, I'm so guilty. Tell them I'm guilty. Give me the death sentence. I ain't afraid to die." But throughout the course of this short tutorial case, you eventually prove that Larry isn't in fact guilty, and that seems like it'll be the last of your interactions with him. But later on, that turns out to be not quite true. You see, this whole thing stems from a simple conversation between Phoenix and his assistant Maya. Why do you trust Edgeworth so much? Back when we first met him, he was kinda a jerk, don't you think? You didn't know him back then, in grade school. They saved me, Miles and Larry. It was early spring in 4th grade, and a young Phoenix was coming down with a cold. Because of that, his teacher let him skip PE for the day, and instead stay in the classroom studying on his own. Now, his school was fairly small, and so at the beginning of each month, the students would bring in an envelope containing all of their lunch money for the semester. However, during this fateful PE lesson, one student's envelope mysteriously vanished. Inside it was $38. That's nothing to sniff at. After the PE lesson finished, the students returned to the classroom to discover an empty envelope. And the only one in the classroom was Phoenix. Naturally, they assumed it had to have been him who committed this truly horrific theft. But how to punish him for the crime? Well, they came up with a solution. The next day, they would hold a class trial to determine Phoenix's guilt. However, as the next day came around, it soon turned out that this class trial was, well, less than judicial. Rather than presenting testimony and weighing up evidence like in a real court, the students began to chant, "Guilty, guilty, guilty! It was you, thief!" Phoenix desperately tried to assert his innocence, but the cruel chanting continued. Scared and confused, he looked to his teacher for some kind of help, any kind of help, but all he got in response was, "Now, Phoenix, you shouldn't steal people's money. It's not right. Apologize to the class, Phoenix." It all seemed like some kind of cruel nightmare to the young student. Everyone was ganging up on him, and he didn't seem to have any way out. But then, all of a sudden, objection! He shouldn't have to apologize. It was Miles Edgeworth, the boy whose lunch money had been stolen, and a budding attorney. Loudly, he called out, "The only thing that belongs in a trial is evidence." Yes, some kind of help for Phoenix. However, Edgeworth's shouts didn't seem to sway the tide of public opinion, and the students continued to chant, "He did it! He's the one!" Yet again, Phoenix was left scared and all alone. But again, help soon came his way. "Why don't you all just shut up?" Another student, Larry Butts, suddenly shouted out at the top of his voice. "This is how it is, everyone ganging up and picking on one person. Just think how he feels." Finally, the class listened. With a sigh, the teacher responded, "Very well, I will replace the money myself. This class trial is over." Later that day, Phoenix ran up to Edgeworth to thank him for his help, and more importantly, thank him for believing in him. Then, out of nowhere, Larry ran up to both of them. Again, Phoenix gave him his gratitude. And from that day forth, Phoenix, Larry, and Edgeworth became inseparable friends. Until a certain incident, anyway. Isn't that a sweet story? Well, until you realise who stole the lunch money all along. But you'll have to play the game to figure that one out. But as I mentioned before, this is just one of the 2 class trials that took place. Because in addition to the fictional one from the game, a similar event took place in the childhood of Shu Takumi, the creator of Ace Attorney, who we talked a little bit about earlier. Let's take a look way back then, shall we? To the summer of 1979. It seemed like any other summer day in a regular middle school in Japan, and 2nd grade student Shu Takumi was playing all alone in the schoolyard. Feeling a little bored, he began exploring this playground, when something in the distance caught his eye. Far away, next to the garbage disposal area, there was something shiny lying on the ground. But what was it? He decided to investigate. Once he got a little closer, he was able to make out what the object was. A small tin can, maybe 5 centimeters tall, with a small piece of origami stuck on the front of it. What was this object, he wondered, and what was it doing just lying on the playground by the garbage area? He decided to pick it up and see what it was. He gave it a shake, and it sounded sort of metallic. What was that? After turning it upside down, the object revealed itself to him. It was a single 5-yen coin. That's about 4 UK pennies. It's really not much. Now, without thinking much of it, the young Takumi put the coin in his pocket, put the can back where he found it, and forgot about the whole thing. But the next day, this harmless act would come back to bite poor Takumi. He was sitting in class during a regular lesson when a knock came on the door. He was called into a classroom he'd never seen before, full of 40 students who he'd never met. And at the front of the class was a 40-year-old and extremely enraged teacher. He turned to Takumi and began scolding him. "Stealing is bad. Now apologize at once." He was led over to a girl who, again, he had never seen in his life, and ordered to apologize for his wrongdoing. Takumi couldn't help but freeze. He didn't have a clue about what was going on. He was confused, scared, and completely alone. All he could think was, "No, it wasn't me. All I did was find it." His mind went blank. Now, let's pause for a second. What on earth is going on here? Well, it turned out that Takumi had fallen foul to a horrid prank by a couple of students in this unknown classroom. You see, the previous day, it turned out that the class had been working on a handicraft project. They had each made their very own piggy bank out of a tin can and a small piece of origami. They simply folded the origami, affixed it to the can, and voila, their money boxes had been created. However, a couple of students from the class had managed to steal one girl's money box without her even noticing, and they later hid it by the garbage disposal area. I think you can see where this is going. Along comes Takumi with no idea of the morning's events, and look, a money box. Without so much as a thought, he just put the 5 yen coin in his pocket. It was 5 yen, after all. Unfortunately for him, another student saw him fiddling with the money box. Which leads us back to, "Hurry up and apologise," the teacher insisted hysterically. Takumi looked around the class, and in return he was greeted by 40 cold stares. The students started to shout at him, "You can't go stealing people's money!" Takumi's mind was blank. He didn't know what to do other than apologise. "I'm sorry," he eventually mustered up, a tear rolling down his cheek. He bowed to the class and began repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," again and again. With no Edgeworth to shout objection, no Larry Butts to yell, "Shut up!" Takumi was left all alone, wondering what he did to deserve all of this. Well, that wasn't very cheerful, was it? But there's a little more to this story. Stick with me for a second. You see, if we fast forward 20 years or so, Takumi was now all grown up, and in the midst of writing the script for his Game Boy Advance lawyer simulator, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. And as he wrote, he suddenly remembered this pretty tragic memory from his childhood. And right then and there, he decided to rework the events to fit the game. It would certainly do a good job of building up the characters he had worked so hard to make the player fall in love with. But this was also an opportunity, a chance to take the negative memories from his past and put a positive spin on them. What if, in that moment when he was feeling so completely alone, someone had stepped in to his defense, quite literally? And so he began writing the events of the class trial, where Phoenix would be accused of stealing a classmate's lunch money, much like the 5 yen he had been accused of taking back in grade school. But he made the crucial addition of 2 moments. "Objection! He shouldn't have to apologise." That was the first. And the second, "Why don't you all just shut up? This is how it is, everyone ganging up and picking on one person. Just think how he feels." That was it. That was what Takumi had needed in his moment of complete loneliness. In a sense, writing this revised scene was a sort of closure for the game designer. It brought an end to the bitter memories from that day. A few days later, Takumi brought up this class trial in a meeting about the game's script, as a sort of joke. But instead of laughing along with him, like Takumi expected and sort of hoped, they instead sympathised with him, felt sorry for him. Takumi was shocked. Somehow this wasn't at all the reaction he had expected. But while the events certainly stung when he was a child, they ultimately proved useful to Takumi. That class trial moment from the first game is heartwarming and incredibly powerful, I think. For a writer, your past experiences influence everything you write. As Takumi himself put it, such trifling, slightly bitter memories. For scenario writers, they're like spices they can take out and use when they have trouble coming up with ideas. But do that for too long, and you'll run out of ideas anyway. Maybe it's about time to get a new stock of trifling, slightly bitter memories. Maybe, Takumi, maybe. Hi there, thank you so much for watching to the end. So it's currently 9:30 or something like that. I've been editing for most of the day, so I'm ready to never look at an attorney again. But I just want to say thank you for watching this much, and also to plug my Twitter. If you're not following me there, then I'd really recommend it, if you want to hear more from me. If you don't, then don't go there. Cool, see you next week then, bye.